Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Dr. Manon.
So welcome to the Healers Café. Today I'm with Lizanne Flynn, and we are going to be talking about animals, I think. It seems mostly she's an animal ambassador and she has an outreach course which is focused on creating a bridge between animals in the wild and humans. And I'd love to talk about all of that, but what got you involved in this in the first place, and how did this all come together for you?
Well, and first of all, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here. I was just thrilled for with the invitation. It's fair to say, Manon, that animals found me, as it sometimes happens during one of those initiation periods in life where things get dismantled that you didn't know were going to be dismantled. And that one of those things happened to be my former career in human resources. And along with that also came, shortly before that ended, was the diagnosis of my body of multiple sclerosis. And so both of those things kind of packed a 1-2 punch. I was fortunate to be able to stay home with my sons and raise them throughout their elementary and mostly their middle school years. But then I realized that I really liked working. I was under the perception, we would probably have to ask my kids, that I was a better parent when I was working. I'm one of those people who likes to have a little something for themselves as far as my own identity. And so on the eve of going back into work, especially given the MS, I thought, let's see, what would challenge my body enough to give me some answers as to how going back into the workforce would affect the MS and my life, my sons, etc. And for whatever reason, the universe pointed me in the direction of volunteering at the local animal shelter. And at that point in time, this animal shelter had a program where volunteers would come in the mornings, and we would take 2 dogs out of the kennels at a time, and we would walk both the dogs, one on either side, along this, I guess, probably rural, like Greenbelt area, which had its own adventures come rain or shine. But the interesting thing is that when I was walking the dogs and in the animal shelter, I became aware of being able to hear the animals. So clairaudience was the first, I guess, probably skill that I didn't know my body possessed when I was thinking about going back into work. And then I became aware of being able to feel what the animals were feeling. There oftentimes were animals that were surrendered from families for whatever reason, and the families couldn't afford to keep them. There was a fair amount of angst. There was a fair amount of fear, of grief on the part of the animals, along with, which is clairsentience, along with the clairaudience of, where's my family? Why can't I go home? Why am I here? And as an empath, as you might imagine, that was a bit of a stiff learning curve in how to separate me in my human experience so that I could be of service in some way to these animals in this now current reality for them, this moment in shelter. And from there, I guess it just kind of took off. So animal communication was the first professional shingle I hung out for myself. In 2008, I wanted to add a physical component to that. So I got certified in canine massage, which does exactly the same thing for dogs that it does for humans as far as what we think the effects of massage are: recovery from illness, from injury. For sporting dogs, it helps them to recover after agility events, etc. From that point in time, one of my colleagues slash fellow students in the canine massage program said, you know, I think you'd really like Reiki. So the universe stepped up again for me. I got directed onto the path of becoming a Reiki master teacher. That was in 2010. And somewhere along the line, I became aware of being able to use my body and function as a medium. I also tell people that I am a medical intuitive, which I am. I also tell people that I know enough about astrology to be dangerous, which means I don't know very much at all. I have great admiration for people who can interpret astrology charts, but pretty much anything between this earthly dimension and other dimensions and the associated beings within those dimensions, I facilitate communication. So I interpret, I translate. My role, I see it as making relationships better, no matter where they happen to be.
Wow, interesting. That's, you came across it naturally, it would seem, but you have to notice, right? You have to go, oh, I have this skill set, gee, and then it just does lead you, right? It's quite amazing. So what is, give me an example of like the work you do, like, like who would, is it the animal owners that come in, or how does it look like?
Very often, and I would say probably 85 to probably 95% of the requests for a session involve another human contacting me and saying, my dog, cat, bird, iguana, turtle, horse, rabbit, cow, pig, whatever species it happens to be, has changed their behavior. And usually the human doesn't like what's going on with this changed behavior. And so I serve as the go-between in that conversation to get the animal side of why this behavior has changed. Because in truth, animals, absent a shared vocalized vocabulary between species, animals use the language of energy best. And so their behavior is the red flag that they use to throw up into the air and say, okay, look, in this shared environment of usually the home that we have together, something is so gone so awry that I am going to stop using the litter box. I am going to start barking and being more reactive toward other animals and towards other people until you, human, have bought a clue from somebody and followed my lead, and knowing that likely if my energy is off, whether you recognize it or feel it or not, your energy is off as well. And so it's under the category of probably behavior problems. I also get a fair number, Manon, of animals in transition, animals who are moving on from this earthly existence into wherever they're going to end up next. And so guardians wanting to know, are they ready? Are they in pain? Is there something else I can do? And so facilitating the transition for animals is something that is always very special to me, because sometimes I'm their last voice in physical form. Their wishes aren't really any different than what ours are. They sometimes have requests for a party before time, ahead of time, who they would like to have at their transition, a special blanket they would like to lay upon, where they want the transition to occur. But all those things added up really help the guardian to feel more confident and comfortable, especially in the cases of euthanasia, which I would add is the animal's preferred way of exiting the planet.
Okay. Now, what about, I know people who have like adopted a dog, from shelters, which, many people do. And let's say the dog has had a clearly traumatic past, as many do. And they're, let's say, seemingly perfectly well behaved and happy with the owners, but the moment anybody else comes, they turn almost vicious, right? So I've been told, well, that's a fear reaction. They're afraid.
Mhm.
But how do you then deal with that? Like, how do you help, or is that maybe not something that you can reach or help? Like how?
Absolutely. And definitely that happens. And I applaud whoever told you that it was a fear-based reaction, because just like the human animal, our reactions are based, and their reactions are based either in fear or in pain. And so, for instance, with an animal in the wild, it looks pretty fierce to us if, for instance, a mother bear, a sow, is charging, should we happen to get too close to her cubs right around perhaps this time of year. It is meant to be defensive in nature, because animals figure, sometimes as do humans, well, I'm going to bite first, or attack first, or come at first, and ask questions later. Again, it's a defensive, it's a protective thing. The key, I think, Manon, is to discover what the catalyst is for that behavior, and work on, to a certain extent, counter conditioning against that behavior and towards the behavior that is wanted. So if it happens to be another dog, if it happens to be a human, sometimes that could be male or female. And you're right, some of this does have to do with the trauma. The other thing I would go with, and interestingly enough, I also use the tools of shamanic journeying and soul retrieval. Soul retrieval, my first ever soul retrieval session involved a dog whose name was Mr. Butters. And Mr. Butters brought me to the place where he had been abandoned outside. He was cold and wet in this cardboard box. And his statement to me was, well, I could have died out there. He wasn't eating at home. He was being quite reactive to other humans that were coming over to his rather newly adopted family. And so in working with Mr. Butters, it's a process where we identify the age. I usually will see a number, and or with animals, a situation. With humans, it's a number, the age at which that trauma occurred. And then walking the human through a meditative process where the adult human now usually says to that soul piece that has stayed back to put a GPS pin, as I like to call it, in that trauma, it's safe to come home. Nothing like that will ever happen to you again. And for humans, of course, that's a very profound thing. Animals, I think, are much better at most things than humans are. And so Mr. Butters made a remarkable recovery, because once he understood and said, oh, there's that piece that when I was homeless, when I was outside, when I was shivering and so cold, where I was so very hungry, I can say to that soul piece, if you will, it is safe to come home. Nothing like that will ever happen to you again. And it was probably a week and a half later, the guardian called me and she said, you would not believe the difference in this dog. And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I would. They have the ability to want to reunite so that they feel as whole as possible. And to a certain extent, Manon, I think it's important for guardians to also be realistic about this trauma. I think that perhaps there are maybe sometimes some kinds of trauma in the animal world that the bandwidth, if, as I put it, has been so narrowed as to incrementally it can be expanded upon, and that's not going to happen overnight.
What would your life be like if you were pain-free? If you were one of the millions who suffer from chronic pain, the thought of just one day without it may seem impossible. This is often because conventional medicine tends to fall short in the treatment of pain, opting to prescribe pills or recommend surgery rather than getting to the root cause of the problem. But if you are suffering with emotional or physical pain, there is hope. Join the founder and CEO of Bowen College, Manon Bolliger, live online for your body-mind reboot. Learn how to listen to your symptoms and get to the root cause of your pain. Plus, be trained in basic Bowen therapy moves so that you can reboot your body for optimal health. You don't have to live in pain. You can heal. Stop the pain pill cycle by visiting www.yourbodymindreboot.com to learn more and to register.
So it does take a lot of patience on the part of the guardian and a knowledge of, well, animal A that I have is reactive to being around strangers, and it doesn't behoove me and it doesn't benefit them to take them to an outdoor party or a place where I know a few people, but there's going to be 25 or 30 people I don't know there, because that communication, if you will, between energy fields, if the guardian is then on alert, either because of the number of people that are there for themselves or because of how they're fearful their dog is going to react, that's kind of a double whammy for the dog, and that's going to put the dog on higher alert. So it may be better in those instances, as much as we might want every dog to be a Labrador Retriever. In energy, we might very well have a dog that is a Labrador Retriever. However, they have more the territorial temperament of, say, a Chihuahua. It may well behoove them and be better for everybody if that dog is simply left at home for that little space of time. It's all about, just like any good relationship, making it about the partner and making it about managing what you know is available to your partner kind of going forward.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no, I think you explained that, very, very well, because there are decisions sometimes, when one needs to make. But I'm curious at how far one can stretch, like how much can animals heal, like with alternative methodologies, like a lot of people use like behavioral science. So they'll give treats if they do a good activity and or that type of thing, which I think, it looks like it works to an extent, and other people might use homeopathy or, Bowen therapy, which is also physical therapy, helps a lot for pain. But these behavioral issues, like the one you were describing, it sounds like here you're talking at a level of, are you communicating with the animal or the animal's I was going to say defender, the animal's owner, to deal with trauma? Like, how is this? It sounds like it's a frequency that you're kind of bringing in and comforting in other ways so that they know that it's okay, right? Like,
Yes.
right. So it's,
yes.
Yeah.
It's all in real time. And so if you were to have an animal companion about which you had questions about their past, questions about their behavior, questions about the future of, gosh, we'd really like to adopt another dog, cat, bird. We want to expand our human family, and so we're thinking about having a baby. All of those things, we're thinking about moving. Just like you would with any other member of the family, you would want to be able to communicate openly and honestly with your animal companion about the whole parameter of everything. They know pretty much anyway what's going on. It always helps to have their guardian and or someone like me validate their thoughts and their emotions to them, as it does for anyone, to say, well, when you took this new job, human guardian, and you started to stay late at work by another hour to an hour and a half, and you came home and you were extra tired, we didn't get the long walk that we used to, it seems like dinner was kind of rushed. All of those sorts of things from their perspective, from the animal's eye view, which is what I call my parent company, is really critical for the guardian to understand that this is kind of a big deal, as it would be to whatever, reverse situation might be applicable to a human. And so it's using what I have called the master language of energy, which is how all the animals on this planet communicate. It is telepathy and empathy. And I recently came across a word just yesterday, as a matter of fact, let me see if I can get this right, telepathy, which actually is in the comic and the graphic novel world, and it's attributed to people like Dr. Jean Grey from The Mutants, et cetera, et cetera. So the ability to read thoughts, if you will, and to understand what other people are feeling. So my body acts as a receiver and a sender. With the human, it is vocally translating and creating the vocal equivalent of whatever that telepathic download is, as I put it. With the animal, it's different, because however they think it's best to share information with me, they'll choose that avenue. And I'm fine to follow their lead. It could be clairvoyance, a clear vision. It could be clairsentience. It could be clairaudience, it could be clairgustance, which is clear tasting, and it could be clairalliance, which is clear smelling. I leave it up to them to give me the information they perceive their guardian needs, because they know much better than I do how to get from point A to point B and have the guardian arrive at that same point B at pretty much the same time.
Interesting. So do you do this only in person or by Zoom? I mean, I imagine if it's energy, it's available on Zoom.
It is. Well, and I have local clients, national clients, international clients. Energy flows everywhere. And so I just make myself available based on intention to whatever the intention, whatever the needs are of that particular human and that particular animal. It could also be, and I always add the caveat with my animal communication clients, to say, oh, by the way, I'm also a medium. And so with your intention, this window of energy is going to open. And through this window of energy, there may very well be an animal or a human that has already transitioned and they have a message for you. So if, say, Great Aunt Gertrude wants to stick her head through the window and say, hey, how y'all doing? I tell them I would like to try and incorporate that, because again, they know better than I do whether it's a particular piece of information that might be relative to the animal communication session, or it could be a piece of information that will simply make the guardian feel more confident and more comfortable and settle something from decades ago.
Right. Yeah.
It's that trusting of energy.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I practiced homeopathy, right? And many times the animal needed the same remedy as their master, right? And it's like, and that was at the beginning of my practice, when I wasn't yet totally surrender to way more
Mhm.
than that. But I find like just like diseases find their hosts at times. I mean, and usually for a reason. And with retrospect, you can go, oh, okay, that's how I learned. I find that there's a similar relationship between, and I would say not always, I can't identify it always, but sometimes the type of animal that a person brings in, it's like, I mean, as in the story that they have is related to what the owners, even though it may be difficult, but what it's integrated. It's like there's no coincidence, right?
Mhm.
You know, and then it has to work its way through, right? And so that's why I find that a lot of this, it's not so much behavioral stuff that is the key here, but it's to get what is the connection, what is it that has to heal, what's the communication that has to be had, because
Exactly.
right, it has to, yeah.
Exactly. And I think, Manon, now I will give you this. I do think animals can mirror for us at times imbalances in energy, particularly if we're talking about a domesticated animal, a dog, cat, a companion animal, aka a pet, that we have in our lives. There can be a mirroring of their behavior and an issue that's going on in our lives. That's their way, again, of raising the red flag and saying, okay, take a look at this behavior over here. Does this look like you would like to have this behavior? Do you understand the energy that is going into this behavior? Is this something that you want to keep on doing? I don't have the perception, or maybe the perspective, that animals take on our in my world, in my vernacular, it would be our soul paths, as far as the experience that we have here on this planet, where health is concerned, relationships are concerned, et cetera, et cetera. I would agree that there is that linkage. And for me, I describe it as the soul contract of between, just like there are soul contracts between humans and between animals, we can also have soul contracts between, I perceive, between animals and humans. So that whatever the soul awareness is of that particular animal matches up perfectly with the soul awareness of that particular human. So that a challenge for the animal comes up, and it's exhibited or manifested in a particular way. And interestingly enough, as you said, there's a non-coincidence that happens, that it also triggers, if you will, a not dissimilar, but a complementing, I think complementary awareness for that particular human and guardian, so that both are on the same journey together, albeit from different vantage points. And so, we often think, oh, I'm going to go to the shelter and I'm going to pick out a dog. Well, I think it's fair to say they see us coming. They know exactly who we are. Oftentimes animals are adopted out for one reason and are returned to the shelter saying, oh gosh, this didn't work out. They just seemed kind of, for whatever reason, the quote unquote energy was off. They return to the shelter. 2 weeks later, their forever family happens to walk through the door. I put that down to the multidimensional awareness in my book of animals, and they know exactly who it is that they're supposed to be matched up with. I mean, to a certain extent, if you were to look at a homeless person or a person who is transient, and oftentimes we may see them with usually dogs. And I think we may ask the question and say, well, how is that okay for that dog? Is that dog being well cared for? They don't have a home. They don't perhaps have enough to eat. From the animal's perspective, and I think this is why we fall so in love with them, is that they commit themselves fully to whatever that experience is. And as challenging as that is for us to admit that or to embrace that, I have yet to have an animal say, oh, I absolutely dreaded that experience with that one guardian. Yes, there may be trauma. At the same time, they know that the very specific soul awareness, and I'm fond of saying soul path is way above my pay grade. I can't possibly say to someone, well, this obviously was a wrong choice for you and you could have chosen differently. And that was, did you really think about the consequences when you made that choice? I can't make that choice for anyone. I can't make that choice for an animal. And again, they're along for the full ride. They go into experiences with their eyes wide open, very much so.
So our time is up. So what, how can people get hold of you?
The easiest way would be to go to my website, which is www.lizanne, LIZANNE, so www.lizanneflynn.com. There's a way for you to send me an email. My phone number is on there. I'm active on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, lizanneflynn.com.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing your experience and knowledge. It was very insightful.
Thank you, Manon.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Dr. Manon.